I love chocolate, everything about it, but I'm a little ho-hum usually about chocolate cupcakes. They can be dry and tough, the frosting can be a little gritty, but fortunately, these ultimate chocolate cupcakes that I'm making today are nothing like that. They've got a cloud of buttery soft frosting on top, a chewy, dense, tender chocolate crumb encasing an ooey gooey ganache filling. These are everything my chocolate dreams are made of, and I can't wait to show you how I've learned to make them. So I'm going to start with a ganache filling first, and I've got 2 ounces of high quality bittersweet chocolate, 60 to 70% here. I've made this recipe before with budget brand chocolate, and it just doesn't turn out the same. So even though I'm using a ton of chocolate for this recipe, I'm going to make sure I use the best I can afford because it's really, really worth it. And now it's time to chop this chocolate finely. Just gonna rock my knife back and forth, and if I had a serrated knife, that's what I'd use here, but I don't just yet. So I'm gonna use this nice big knife. And the cool thing about this knife is that it has a nice wide blade that can almost double as a bench scraper. So I'm gonna use the back of my knife, safety first here, and just guide the chocolate into this heat-proof bowl. And to that, I've got a tablespoon of powdered sugar and a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. Now I'm gonna pop this mixture into the microwave for 20 to 30 seconds. And it should look something like this. Once I've made and portioned the cupcake batter, I'm going to dollop little balls of this ganache into the center of each cupcake. But in order to do that, the ganache is going to have to be cold. So this is gonna go into the fridge for 30 minutes. Cupcake liners going into my cupcake tin. And now for the cupcake batter. I've got 3 more ounces of that good quality chocolate, some Dutch processed cocoa, and some leftover coffee from breakfast this morning that's hot. All right, chocolate in first, then my Dutch processed. I never used to believe that there was a difference between Dutch processed and regular cocoa, but since making this recipe, I've learned that it really does have a major impact. Dutch processed produces a much darker, almost black cupcake with a complex, deep flavor. All right, I got about 1 ounce here. Now 6 ounces of the coffee. No need to get fancy here, but I did reheat it so that it's nice and hot, just the right temperature to melt this chocolate and combine it with the cocoa. And a quick whisk until the mixture is nice and smooth. No clumps of cocoa here. And now into the fridge for 20 minutes so that it can cool completely. Time for the dry part of this batter. I've got 4 1/8 ounces of bread flour, and the bread flour is important here because it produces a sturdier cake than all-purpose flour would. We need this cupcake to be sturdy in order to hold in all of that gooey ganache filling, otherwise I'll end up with cake all over my hands and face, which is good in a way, but not what I'm looking for here. To the flour, I'm adding a little bit of sugar. This is 5 1/4 ounces of granulated sugar. Notice I'm using my scale to measure almost exactly. If I can eliminate any unforced errors in this process, I like to do my best and be as meticulous as possible. A 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, another quick whisk to combine all those ingredients. And now it's time to bring back my chilled coffee chocolate mixture. This is going to be the base of the wet part of this batter. So to that, I'm adding 2 teaspoons of white vinegar, which I think will add a little bit of tang to these cupcakes, and 6 tablespoons of neutral flavored oil, which will make sure these cupcakes are nice and moist. I hate that word, but you get the idea. All right, and a teaspoon of vanilla extract here. Now I'm cracking 2 eggs directly into the bowl, being extra careful not to get any errant shells in the mix. So far so good, I think. And I'm just gonna break up these eggs, combine all those liquids before I add my dry ingredients. And I'm doing this in a few batches because I find that it's a lot easier to avoid getting flour all over the counter. I'm also better able to incorporate the flour in small amounts than I am if I just pour the whole thing into the center. little bit of runaway flour here. I do my best not to overwork this batter. I found that overmixing the batter can lead to dense and tough cupcakes. I want to make sure that these are light and fluffy, so just enough to make sure there aren't any streaks of white flour remaining. Alright, and now because I'm naturally a very messy baker, I'm going to transfer my batter into a 4-cup Pyrex, and I'm hoping that pouring it out of this Pyrex through the spout will help me avoid getting chocolate batter all over my hands and clothes. I'm not optimistic, but we're going to see what happens. Got a little kitchen towel here just for backup. You can tell it's gonna get pretty messy. Halfway there, no major mess up so far. Switch to my spatula now. Obviously the kitchen towel wasn't quite doing the job. It's just dripping everywhere now, so I'm gonna go full bore and just keep moving forward. Alright, see what I mean? It's looking a little abstract. But I'm just going to use my kitchen towel to wipe away any large messes and spills. I really don't like it when batters or doughs bake onto my baking tins. I found that they're just really hard to remove later. And now for that chilled ganache. So I'm just going to dollop about a rounded teaspoon on top of each cupcake. As you can see, they're floating on the top really nicely right now. And the cool part of this recipe is that the ganache is actually going to sink into the cupcakes as the cupcakes rise in the oven. So when you bite into a cupcake, it's going to have a distinct, gooey little center inside. Alright, now that's done, into the oven for 17 to 19 minutes until they're just firm to the touch, just like this. And I'm going to let these cool in the pan for 10 minutes, and after that, I'm going to safely remove each cupcake and place it on this wire rack to cool for at least an hour. I love that you can see that little divot with the chocolate ganache inside. I'm going to use a little helper just in case any cupcakes are extra stubborn today. And while those cool, it's time to start on my chocolate frosting. Now, this frosting is a little more complex than most average buttercreams. It involves a double boiler, it involves heating some egg whites with some sugar, and while there's a little extra effort, the results are so worth it. It's sweet without being gritty, it's chocolatey without being dense, and it's melt-in-your-mouth decadent. It's my go-to frosting for pretty much everything. First things first, I got 6 ounces of chocolate that I'm going to melt in this small saucepan, and I could melt this chocolate in a microwave, but I tend to scorch my chocolate when I microwave it, and this happens to be a lot of chocolate and a lot of good quality chocolate, so I'm not going to risk ruining it. If I ruined it, I'd have to go back to the store, have to buy more chocolate. That's never fun. So I'm just going to melt it low and slow over my induction burner. Heat this to very low heat. The lowest my induction burner will go. I'm just going to wait until the chocolate is completely melted. This could take a few minutes, but I'm in it for the long haul now. I've got the whole afternoon to make these cupcakes. Once that's done, the chocolate can sit off to the side to cool. Now it's time to bring out my stand mixer bowl. I'm going to separate 2 whole eggs. And I just need the whites for this. I'm going to use my hands here. I do like using my hands, even though it's a little messy. I found that if I use the shells, I tend to puncture the egg yolk, and then I have no idea how much egg white or egg yolk is in which part of the recipe. So just like to use my hands, and it kind of feels good and satisfactory in a weird way. All right, gonna save those egg yolks for a scramble later today or maybe tomorrow for lunch. To decide that later. And now just a little bit of sugar. I say just a little bit because we'll be adding a considerable amount of butter later. This is 2 1/3 ounces here. Now just a little whisk to get this started. When that's done, I'm going to create a double boiler. All right, so I've got a medium saucepan here. I'm adding 2 to 3 inches of water to the bottom of this pan. I'm gonna let the water come up to a simmer. Once that's simmering, my stand mixer bowl goes into the saucepan, making sure that the water does not touch the bottom of the saucepan. And my goal here is to get this mixture to about 150 degrees. This could take a few minutes, so don't mind me. I'm also looking for the mixture to become kind of thick and syrupy, and the sugar needs to dissolve completely before I'm ready to move to the next step. All right. Feeling like we're pretty close. I'm seeing some steam. So, yep, it's 150 degrees, right in the dot. I'm gonna remove my saucepan from the pan. And here comes my stand mixer and my butter. My butter is softened, not melted. It's really important to keep it at that room temperature state. Now I'm going to beat the egg whites and sugar mixture on medium-high, and I'm going to check the bottom of the bowl every now and then. Now before I can add my butter, this egg white and sugar mixture needs to cool down. Within a few minutes, the egg whites should be about at room temperature, which means they won't melt the butter when I add it in 1 tablespoon at a time. And I'm going to make sure every piece of butter is fully incorporated before I add the next one. Last piece. Almost there. We are so close to frosting these cupcakes. Sometimes after I've added the last piece of butter to my frosting, I've noticed that it can look a little curdled. And before I learned otherwise, I used to just sit and cry into my frosting and start over and waste a whole bunch of butter. But I know better now, so if I see it curdling, I'm just gonna let the mixer run, maybe for another 5 minutes, and it should come back together on its own. I'm not seeing any curdling today, so I think I'm all good to move forward to the next step, which is testing my chocolate to make sure it's cool. And by cool, I mean it needs to be at 80 degrees or lower. Any higher than 80 degrees, and it's going to melt the butter in my frosting. Melted butter means soupy frosting, and we don't want that for these cupcakes. All right. Quick temperature check. This is looking so fluffy. One last temperature check here. Yep. 79 degrees, that's perfect. Now before I add my chocolate, I'm just gonna add 1 last teaspoon of vanilla extract. And I'm gonna drizzle the chocolate down the side of the bowl. I found that doing this helps reduce any backsplash from the chocolate hitting the whisk. The more chocolate that stays in the bowl, the better, for obvious reasons. Now finally, I'm going to use my spatula and just scrape every last bit of that chocolate into my stand mixer bowl with the mixer running. And now do a little check. This frosting is looking delicious. Do a little scrape down. And give it one last high-speed beat. And now we are pretty much ready to get frosting these cupcakes. All right, one last scrape. down the sides of the bowl just to incorporate any last bits of chocolate that could be stuck at the bottom. This is looking so velvety, so delicious, and I love that it has a ton of air in it. These are going to make for really nice, lofty frosted cupcakes. So here's what I like to do. I like to use a little cookie scooper and dollop maybe 1, maybe 2 mounds of frosting to the top of each cupcake. Then I can use a little spatula, a knife, or a spoon and create lovely little swirls on the tops of each cupcake. There we go, 2 scoops, little spatula, making some nice swirls. I like to push the frosting off to the sides of the cupcake, but I still like to leave a little lip of cake just so that when you pick up the cupcake, you don't get frosting all over your hands. I mean, it's inevitable. You're probably going to get frosting all over your nose and face anyway. But I like to at least create the perception of neatness at first glance. Alright, these cupcakes are to die for. I can't wait to dig in. I hope you enjoyed watching me as much as I enjoyed making these. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And definitely let me know in the comments what you think about this video. Thanks for watching!